everybody a little bit of your background, quick intro, and we can take it from there.
Sure. Thanks, Emerald. Thanks for having me. It's certainly an exciting time. I'm Chris Matone, president at Panta. Thrilled to step into this new role and really lead the charge. We've announced recently that we're planning an IPO this year, and so it's quite a bit of work ahead of us. But certainly an exciting time for the company as we tackle early detection in cancer and various diseases, and we're certainly passionate about that at Persanta, and look forward to developing a whole new platform and a new approach to liquid biopsy testing.
Great. So look, we continue to talk about our business model. ADTX as a platform, the way we look at innovations or the way we conduct business is we identify innovations that have significant potential to address some of our most pressing health challenges. That's what we do. We bring them in-house, we build them as a business, we advance every aspect of the business from innovation, capital, operational support, finance, communications, everything that's required to advance that innovation and that business forward, with a goal to position them for global commercialization. And Persanta is certainly an example of that. And look, we'll start with Persanta, and we'll touch on the status of what it is, what the plan is, what the commercialization plan is. Then we'll talk about AdImmune, which, quite a bit of progress has been made just in the last few months. We'll talk about the status of Evop and Appal, which I know it's quite a bit of interest, from stakeholders that need to understand kind of where things are. But maybe we'll start with Persanta. And if you don't mind, Chris, I'll just start with, really, really simple, high-level overview of why Persanta. So the bottom line that we all appreciate, the best way to provide high probability of success or higher probability of success when it comes to cancer is early detection. We all know that. The earlier, the better. And with Persanta, starting with its mission as a precision diagnostic company, we believe that cancer is certainly one of the most pressing health challenges that need to be addressed. So about a year ago, maybe a little longer than a year ago, Persanta identified an innovation and a company and a team that's been focused on cancer, and they have a very promising platform that could address that early detection that is in a non-invasive way that could make it economically feasible and logistically feasible. So using mitochondrial DNA, the company was focused on using that technology to really begin to see if we can early detect cancer, starting with prostate cancer. So that's the asset that we acquired, and Chris was the former CEO of mDNA and joined the team, and he is the one that's pushing Persanta forward and the team towards that mission. So Chris, with that, why don't I kind of turn it over to you, talk about where we are, what the platform does, some of the statistics that you share, and why the IPO.
Sure. Thanks, Emerald. As you mentioned, it's really all about early detection, and we're thrilled to have the Mitomic platform we recently acquired, as you mentioned, to develop as a tool for enabling patients and clinicians and delivering powerful information, actionable information for early detection. We know that cancer is still the second leading cause of death, and we know that millions every year are getting late diagnoses, and those late diagnoses, quite frankly, just cost lives. We say that early detection saves lives, and it's true. Detecting various cancers in the early stages has survival rates in the 90s. But when detected too late or in the later stages, survival rates plummet. So in prostate cancer, for example, in the later stages, survival rates are at 32%. In ovarian cancer, in late stage detection, they plummet to 29%. In lung cancer, when detected in the later stages, it plummets to 7%. And it's not just cancer. Diseases like endometriosis, which affect 10% of women worldwide. This is a debilitating disease. There is a delay of 10 years between the onset of symptoms and a diagnosis. The only way to diagnose that is through invasive surgeries. That disease it also represents an enormous clinical gap and diagnostic gap. And so we aim to leverage the mitochondrial DNA and this new platform to detect these diseases earlier in a simple blood sample. The mitochondrial DNA is very powerful. We know it generates power for the cells. What you may not know is that it mutates at a very high rate. The cells do not repair the DNA in the mitochondria like we do in nuclear DNA. And these mutations are disease specific and they're allowed to persist and accumulate. And so the mitochondrial DNA presents an opportunity as an ideal biosensor for the early detection of disease. And so we're quite excited about our two lead candidate programs this year. Our first test will be a blood-based test for endometriosis to detect that disease early, significantly compress the time to diagnosis for those women and get them into the right treatment pathway sooner. And the second is for prostate cancer in blood to identify clinically significant prostate cancer, not just to detect cancer, but to detect the cancer that is clinically significant and is a good candidate for biopsy, helping to also allow many men to avoid unnecessary surgeries and biopsies and forego those procedures. And that's really just the beginning of our pipeline. We're moving on to blood-based tests for ovarian cancer, for lung cancer, liver, esophageal, stomach, and pancreatic. So a true platform. And so we're certainly excited about the IPO initiative for this year. Access to the capital markets will allow us to fuel these commercial launches this year, fuel product development for 2026 and beyond, and help us expand not only nationally, but globally. So we'll be launching these tests initially out of our state-of-the-art CLIA/CAP certified lab in Richmond, Virginia, and expanding through distribution into over 40 countries outside the US. We're currently engaging in dialogue with distributors that already have boots on the ground, sales and marketing teams in place, calling on the right touch points. And so we're excited to partner with these leading healthcare providers in other countries as well to expand access to these life-changing tests.
Wonderful. And Chris, this is an important point, and Jeff, feel free to jump in as well. Look, part of our business model, part of ADTX business model is, again, we identify and acquire these assets or companies, we build them. And it is important to highlight the fact that Panta, you're not going IPO just with focus on research and development. I mean, you obviously have, you'll do R&D as you move forward, as you mentioned, but right now you're in a position where you can go commercial at least second half of this year, right? And that the IPO is to advance that commercial launch and of course beyond. So to reiterate what you said, you have the facility, the Richmond facility, the CLIA/CAP facility. Can you just clarify the FDA approval? Because that question will come up, the difference between FDA versus LDT, what your plan is as far as launching that test commercially.
Sure. So the initial launch will be as a lab-developed test in LDT, clinically validated in our CLIA/CAP certified lab. As the regulatory environment continues to evolve, we will be putting together the dossiers for the necessary FDA submissions down the road, but initially commercial launch can be enabled as an LDT out of our CLIA lab in Richmond.
And sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Chris, maybe can you just explain what the LDT, what that looks like for people to understand?
Sure. So the LDT is in molecular diagnostics is a workflow that is validated under CLIA, under CAP, and those are governed by CMS. And so the clinical performance characteristics are established in our lab, precision, reproducibility, et cetera. And that allows us to make these tests available commercially much faster than traditional pre-market approval routes with the FDA.
Great. I forgot to mention this, Chris, at the beginning. Maybe part of your background, a little bit of your background, industry, field, and why you're involved in this and why you decided to continue after the acquisition of the Mitomic platform.
Sure. So my academic background is in molecular biology, so I've always been interested in the science. But I've been in diagnostics for over 24 years. I started out with companies like Abbott and Bayer and QIAGEN, very early on focused on molecular diagnostics and leveraging novel molecular tools for the early detection of disease. specifically in oncology. And so prior to Persanta, I spent over 8 years at MD&A Life Sciences, really moving the novel mitomic technology from what was originally tissue-based testing over to much more cost-effective blood-based testing, and expanding the pipeline of potential product candidates for that platform. And so recently, as we mentioned, through the acquisition, Persanta acquired the company. We bring along a very experienced science team as well. And so, quite frankly, I've stayed on because I'm very passionate about using these tools to deliver cost-effective, actionable information to patients and clinicians, to broaden access across all socioeconomic groups globally, to enable early detection, and increase better outcomes across a broad range of diseases, starting in oncology.
Great, thanks. All right, Chris, we may have a couple of questions here as we move forward. I know I'm looking at the clock to make sure that we're giving as much information to the folks that have joined us, and of course to the folks that are going to be viewing this afterwards. So Persanta is one of our programs. I want to clarify, one thing. Couple emails that came in the past. They weren't exactly sure the relationship between ADTX and Persanta. Persanta is a majority-owned company by ADTX. So all of our programs, they're organized as a subsidiary, majority-owned by ADTX. Of course, we have some options for the team, but that's what Persanta is, and that's owned by ADTX, again, majority-owned, and its stakeholders. So maybe I'll touch on ADImmune. ADImmune, folks, similar to Persanta, another innovation with a potential of addressing some of our most pressing health challenges. That's our business model. And ADImmune has a platform called ADI, and ADI is designed to retrain the immune system to address autoimmunity. So at a very high level, right now, autoimmunity in general is addressed by suppressing our immune system. And immune modulation and retraining the immune system is a fundamentally different approach that uses our own body's mechanism to get it to remember to not attack our own tissues, right? Causing type 1 diabetes, psoriasis, multiple sclerosis, and all kinds of other autoimmune diseases. This IP, this platform, was licensed from Loma Linda University. It was in research for, I think, around 20 years. We brought it in-house. We formed ADImmune. Dr. Friedrich Kapp is leading the charge, similar to Chris, leading Persanta. And I couldn't be more proud to really get ADI to where we are today. So as of today, and as I've mentioned in the past, our milestone and inflection point for ADI is to get it to human trials. That is key for ADI and ADImmune. And as of today, we're moving forward on addressing some of the some aspects that are required to ship the product. So the actual drug substance, the ADI 100, that's the very first product that's designed or planned for type 1 diabetes and psoriasis in Germany, and stiff person syndrome in the US in partnership with the Mayo Clinic. That product actually exists. It's completed. It's sitting in our contract manufacturer right now. It does require a payment before releasing the product, but Friedrich and their team have already moved forward on a process, the auditing process of the manufacturer or the facility that will be receiving the drug. So the program is moving forward. We look forward to actually releasing the product and beginning the process of the clinical trial application for Germany, or in Germany, for type 1 diabetes and psoriasis, and stiff person syndrome here in the US with the Mayo Clinic. And our planned milestone, again, is second half of this year. And it's been a lot of push, but it's something that we're very proud of the progress we've made. Jeff, anything that we need to talk about as far as ADImmune? And I know that we will continue updating our stakeholders as we've done. If you have not yet, please go back to some of the press releases that we've done in the past to see what the preclinical studies and the results look like, which were very promising. Jeff, anything that we need to bring up as far as ADImmune?
I don't think I think you covered everything on Adammune, Amro, that I can think of. That's for this presentation. I think maybe if you don't mind, maybe segueing to Appalai and the status of Appalai.
Absolutely. So Appal transaction continues to move forward. We are in close discussion with Appal team. And look, we got to start with why Appal, similar to why Persanta and addressing cancer through early detection, why Adimmune and addressing autoimmunity through immune training. We always got to start with why Appal. Look, we believe infectious diseases and the approach to infectious diseases needs a fundamentally different approach where it begins with understanding someone's immune profile. And based on that, and based on the indication, and based on the particular health issue, you begin to look at antiviral development as well as vaccine development. So that's the overall concept, and that's the overall mission of Appalai if we close the transaction. And I use if because it's not done yet. So we continue to work with Appalai. Appalai, from a shareholder point of view, their shareholders approved it. That was announced. And again, we continue to work with the team as far as how do we get it done. We've repeated over and over and over again in our press releases that it does require capital to close the transaction. That capital is some for their shareholders, some for their existing vendors, some for their senior note holders. And frankly, we want to make sure that that capital is raised in a way that is conducive to our success moving forward. And everybody's been working towards that goal. And we'll update our stakeholders as they come. It is important to also bring up the fact that Appalai is not just another scientific concept. Appalai has an experienced team in the field, and they've managed to secure grants and programs and partnerships all focused on infectious diseases. I believe the latest number that they secured almost $33 million in the past towards programs dealing with infectious diseases from the US DoD and Air Force. And they continue to submit future proposals that will be conducive. Assuming they come, that becomes a non-dilutive source of capital to advance these programs and to obviously lend it the credibility that we all look for. So that's as far as Appalai is concerned, Jeff. Anything that I missed or anything that we need to bring up?
I don't think so. I think maybe when you're done after you go through the other business items, we can talk about capital that relates to Appalai and everything else together. But yeah, maybe go to Evofem now, and then we circle back to capital.
So here is where we are technically with Evofem, and similar to Appalai. I continue to work with Sandra and her team. So we have continued communication with the company, and where we are, I believe the outside date was end of January last month. They withdrew their proxy special meeting for reasons that was last year, but the agreement continues to be in force and in effect unless somebody terminates it. So either company has the right to terminate it, but the agreement continues to be in effect. And we continue to work in good faith to see how we can move this transaction forward. Evofem, unlike Appalai, every transaction has its own set of dynamics that you have to deal with. Evofem has a senior lender that we have to address appropriately. Evofem has other security holders that we also have to address. So it is a transaction that needs to be addressed, properly. But to do the same thing with, like I did with Persanta and Adimmune and Appalai, why Evofem? Women's health and health innovations for women require focus. And we saw Evofem as an opportunity to have him as a foundation for building innovations to address diagnosis like endometriosis. That's the one that Chris was just talking about earlier. To address preventative products such as Fixie, and taking Fixie beyond that and supporting them and taking Fixie beyond the US, but globally, and introducing it or really having plans for sexually transmitted diseases, if that's what they choose to do, as they've done in the past, and other treatments like SoloSick and other products in the future. So we see Evofem as a foundation, strong foundation for women's health. And again, we continue to work together to see where, where the transaction ends up. It does require capital, just like any other transaction. And look, it is no secret to all of our audience here. We are a young company and we are operating in a microcap environment that has not been very supportive of microcap. And that's where we are. So we have two programs, Adimmune, Persanta, and we have two pending acquisitions, and we will continue to update as we have meaningful and material information with our stakeholders.
Right. Great, great. If it's okay with you, this might be a good time to talk about capital, right? Because I think that's I kind of look at myself a bit as an advocate for investors. I am an investor, and yes, we're handling all the communications with investors, but I know how investors think, and I know we get a lot of questions that come in. Rather than go through all of them, they all have pretty much a common theme, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time, people really do understand or are very excited about the businesses that you're building. The question is, how do you pay for it, right? You're a microcap company. This is the challenge that we have, and you have a complicated cap structure, which I know you're working toward cleaning up, but maybe you can address that a bit.
Sure. And Jeff, you said it well. And I know, obviously stakeholders and people understand this. We as a business, our North Star is our success will ultimately be defined by the success of each program. That's our success. It's not by daily trading. It's not by trading up or trading down. It's not by trading right or left. It's not. And I understand, microcap company, highly traded, highly visible. We cannot run the business based on somebody's trading strategy. And I've said that for years, right? It's great. We have the liquidity, but we cannot run a business based on a trading strategy. Ultimately, our North Star, our success is when Persanta and Chris and his team are successful launching the platform for early detection of cancer. That to us is a success. Our success is defined by Adimmune and Friedrich and his team to make sure that we get ADI to human trials and hopefully get it to the point where it can actually treat patients and people that are struggling with psoriasis and type 1 diabetes and other autoimmune diseases. Our success will be defined if Appal succeeds in advancing its products where we can take a fundamentally different approach to infectious diseases. Our success is defined by advancing, accelerating innovations that could help women all over the world. That's our success as a company. Now, as a young company and as a company that's pre-profit, we must have the fuel to advance those innovations. There is no other way. We must have the fuel. A plane cannot fly without fuel. That's a fact of life. We're not Merck, we're not Pfizer, we're not Google, we're not NVIDIA. We don't have a ton of cash, and fuel is necessary, period. So the question is, how do you go about it? And I'm going to divide it up to two things. One, you have to determine how and what equity strategy to use to raise that capital. Now, many companies, including us, you go out and you can raise capital through structured financing. That is tough on the company, but it gets you the capital you need. That's just one. Number two, you can have an equity line or an ATM off the shelf, which is easier on the stock because you're only raising capital using common shares. This is one of the questions we get. And Jeff, what about dilution?
Yep.
If you're gonna raise capital, you're gonna dilute, using a shelf, using an ATM is a better way than structured. But of course, there are pros and cons. You have to do both sometimes.
Sure.
For example, and I will make sure I say this, look, on average or overall, and that number could have changed up or down, we've been using our shelf for about 10% of the total volume, dollar volume and share volume. So we're not using the shelf in a way that's aggressive. And I know that, we get a lot of questions about the shelf. No, we've been using it around 10%, around that number, 9, 11, somewhere around there. So we've been very conservative in our approach to actually raise that capital, but we've been very well positioned as a company, not only to have the businesses we just discussed, but to also have the fuel that's needed to advance these innovations. Beyond that, we have been looking at debt. Again, as a young company, we're not going to get the type of debt that we would like to get, but we are certainly exploring some debt potentials and options to minimize that. Number four, grants. Appal is not our company, just to make sure, but the path that they're taking to use non-dilutive funding, 33 million the last few years since they were founded is not small chunk, and that advances the business. So we're looking at every aspect of capital to see what would be the most efficient way to advance these innovations. And the second portion is a platform. As a NASDAQ company, it is important. I know, I was looking at a website that shows the number of companies that were delisted last year, I think about 460, 470 companies. And the year before was around the same number. Having a NASDAQ as a platform is important for us to access capital efficiently. So when we're talking about reverse split, another question that we get, nobody, maybe that's not true, but certainly not us. We don't get up in the morning hoping that we do a reverse split. What CEO does not want their stock to be $10 and $20 and $30 and $40, right? We're at 10 cents or 11 cents. But it's still a trading stock right now, I believe, not based on fundamentals. So where does that put us? Our focus, our team's focus, the subsidiaries, including Chris and Friedrich, our focus is on our North Star. We have to advance ADI so we could potentially address autoimmunity. We have to advance Panta so we could potentially address cancer. We have to advance Appal if we successfully climb to advance solutions for infectious diseases and the rest, and so on. As we've done this and as we have raised capital, I can tell you the three aspects of the business. Number one, we're advancing our businesses from Panta to Adimmune and potentially the other potential acquisitions that we've been discussing. Number two, we've used the capital that we've been raising to significantly improve our balance sheet. And when Tom, our CFO, releases our financials, we'll show those numbers in the K and the Q coming up. We've also significantly improved our capital table to make it aligned with our business model and our strategic growth plans. So that's where we are. And I do believe the company is certainly better positioned than we were. And we will continue to focus on our mission. And that's how we define success.
Excellent. I mean, I think you addressed the questions I was about to ask regarding application of those funds that you're raising, making sure that you're improving the balance sheet, in which I think ultimately creates much, much greater equity value for investors. So I think you covered that actually just now.
And Jeff, I'll have a question now for you.
Me? Okay.
Yeah. So look, given the nature of our business model, and it's identify and buy them, build them, launch them. Part of our DNA, pun intended, is to engage stakeholders, whether it's shareholders, partners, advocates, listeners, patients across the world. Communication is key. And we have a long way to go when it comes to communications, and it'll never stop. I mean, we'll continue. So why don't you're here with us, that communication is key for our success and to our success. Why don't you share with everybody what your vision is? What do you want to accomplish? How are we going to accomplish this? And how are we going to keep stakeholders updated with what's going on in the company, which is a lot.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And let me start off by saying that, a big part of the reason why I really am excited about what we're doing is because, I've worked with literally hundreds and hundreds of companies, and it's never easy. Your approach to how you're handling very, very difficult situations, to me, is very, very admirable. And I think it's perfectly suited for the kind of communication we want to talk about, right? So what we're working on right now is building out a really global platform for ADTX to communicate with stakeholders, right? And it goes far beyond just shareholders. There's a lot of people that get affected or will be positively affected by what you're doing. So the idea is we want to build out full social media profiles, get you on all the sites you need to be on in a high quality way. And we're going to continue to, create that ability for you to communicate with shareholders and stakeholders on a regular basis. Again, I really do admire the approach you're taking here. I know shareholders get frustrated because things don't always go in the timeline that they like. But these things do take time. And the fact that I think that you're willing to to deal with shareholders. And I can say this, Amro's philosophy is to really pretty much engage with everybody that reaches out to the company. So look, we'll do our best to make sure that happens. But the idea is really to build a global presence for ADTX and really expand on everyone's understanding of the mission here and follow its success, good and bad. Like we talk about, there's going to be good days and bad days, but continue to share it. It's a very authentic way to deliver a message, and I think a really admirable way to run the company.
We have a good team. We have good partners. We have good stakeholders. In fact, Chris knows in the press release, in case somebody didn't pay attention beyond the title and the first paragraph, Chris, which really touches on one area where it's non-dilutive funding. He went out and he applied and, submitted 2 proposals. One did not get approved. One did not get funded. We put it in the press release, but the one still outstanding. And Chris, I'm assuming you're going to continue seeking these non-dilutive funding opportunities, not just for funding, but also to advance the platforms in different indications. You want to touch on, I know we're way over time right now, but just you want to touch on anything with regards to that?
Sure. To your point, Emerald, our team is constantly looking for additional non-dilutive grant opportunities. Because we have such a deep pipeline and so many biomarkers within oncology, there are a number of opportunities that pop up. So as those opportunities arise, we're putting together proposals for funding for various studies. Unfortunately, the one for ovarian cancer, well, it was a little too early. We do have one in for prostate cancer that's still under review, and we're looking for others. In addition to oncology, we're also looking for opportunities in areas like Alzheimer's and other disease categories that can represent growth opportunities for us in the future.
Great, thank you, Chris. Unless you have anything else, Jeff, I'm going to go ahead and just thank everybody. Go ahead. Do you have something before we wrap it up?
No, I think you really covered all the points, Amro, and like I said, we'll do our best to continue to communicate. But I think you covered everything for today.
Thank you. We really appreciate people that joined us. I mean, we have 500 people. That's a large number relative to the ones that we've done in the past. We're going to continue to do this. We know we have a lot more work to do when it comes to communications. We know we have a lot more work when it comes to replying to emails and keeping the stakeholders updated with what's going on. However, that said, look. Our North Star again is addressing autoimmunity with Addimune, addressing cancer with early detection, and everything I mentioned. This is our North Star, and 2025. We want to make sure that Panta goes commercial. We want to make sure that Addimune begins its human trials, and we want to make sure the rest of the programs reach their inflection points as well. So thank you again, and thanks, Chris, for joining us. Jeff, thank you again for helping me do this, and we'll connect again next time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.